We all bring our stories to meditation. Sometimes they're helpful stories, sometimes they're not. Even the Buddha brought his stories to the meditation. That first knowledge on the night of his awakening was basically his story, looking back over many lifetimes. And the big issues were his name, his appearance, his food, his experience of pleasure and pain, and then how he passed away. That's pretty much it. The life of living beings. Name, appearance, food, pleasure, pain, death. Not much of a story. And yet we can elaborate that into all kinds of things. And spend our whole lives going over certain details, certain incidents in the stories, especially the painful ones. Or you can go back and look back on some pleasures that you're missing now, and those past pleasures can get painful too. And so the Buddha found two ways to get out of his stories. One was to generalize. Think about all living beings. That was his second knowledge. The question arose, if he had previous lifetimes, how about other beings? And maybe looking at other beings, he could begin to see some general patterns. And that's precisely what happened. He could see how beings died and then were reborn based on their actions, based on the quality of their intentions, shaped by their views. And from there he went to the third knowledge, which took that knowledge of the second knowledge, the understanding, the pattern he saw in the second knowledge, and applied it to the present moment, looking at his views and his intentions in the present moment, taking them apart. And that was how he got out of stories altogether. So as we meditate, we want to think about that pattern that the Buddha followed. We've got to get out of our narratives, out of our stories, otherwise they just drive us crazy. You go over the same old movies over and over again. Movies that if they were put up on the screen you wouldn't pay to watch. And yet because of the I and the me, my pain, my pleasure, my appearance, my food, you get hooked into watching them over and over again. So we want to get out of those stories. First thing is to start generalizing. Think of all the beings in the world who've had appearances they didn't like, or food they didn't like, or missed the food that they once had that they did like, or suffered both pleasure and pain. You're not the only one. Think about that often. These are things that we all undergo. And the particulars of our appearance and food and pain and pleasure may enthrall us, but you've got to look at the general pattern. And then from the general pattern, as it takes the sting out of your own personal narrative, then you can come to the present moment and see what you're doing in the present moment that's contributing to more pain and pleasure that doesn't have to be there. And what do you have in the present moment? You've got fabrications. That's what one of the definitions of fabrication is: intention. So what kind of fabrications do you have here? Well, you've got the breath. That's the bodily fabrication. You've got directed thought and evaluation. Those are verbal fabrications. And then you've got feelings and perceptions. And the intentional element in those, that's mental fabrication. So these are the things you want to understand. You understand them by learning how to master them, approaching them as a skill, What's the most skillful way to breathe? What's the most skillful way to think about and evaluate your breath? What are the most skillful perceptions to apply to the breath? What kind of feelings do you want to develop out of the breath? As you get more and more absorbed in this, that really helps you get you out of your narratives. Remember my first year as a monk back in Thailand. Had a lot of time by myself, a lot more than you guys do. And sure enough, a lot of my old narratives from grade school, high school, college, family, kept coming back, coming back, coming back. But I found the one thing that kept me from going crazy was the fact that I had something to explore in the present moment, and that was the breath. And as I got more of a handle on the breath, got more absorbed in the breath, the fascination with the old narratives began to wane. And the understanding began to arise that if I really wanted to understand why I was suffering from those old past narratives, I'd like to see how I was causing suffering for myself in the present moment. And the breath was going to be a good way to explore that. So the more absorbed you get in the breath is a very important way of getting out of those narratives and really into the big issue, why you're causing stress and suffering for yourself right now. You're not a passive observer. You're not here watching a TV show that you can either like or not like. You're actively creating the show. So it's important to look at how you think about the breath, how you perceive the breath. And this is where John Lee's instructions on the different levels of breath energy are really helpful. He talks about the levels of breath. There's the in and out breathing, then there's the breath that goes to the nerves and the blood vessels, courses through the body. And then there's that still breath he talks about. And it's important you realize that all three levels of breath are happening all the time. And it depends on which one you focus on, what you're going to notice, and also which one you focus on is going to determine how strong your concentration can be, how steady it can be. As you work first with the in and out breath, you can get the mind to a certain level of concentration. But that only goes so far. You're still changing from in to out, in to out. And you may have the sense that the in breath is something very different from the out breath.